We're on video. So this is, we wanted to do keeping it real, right? And because learning from people is probably the most important thing. And I'm sure part of your journey was kind of figuring things out. I'm sure there's people in your life that helped you get to the place where you're at, right? So we'll keep it really simple. First of all, tell us a little about who you are. We know you're an investor, but who's Kyle Mokhtarian?
Okay. Yeah.
Family, where you're from.
Thanks for the kind intro, Gabe.
Yeah.
So I'm Kyle. I'm from Tucson. I grew up here. Went to CDO High School, went to U of A,
yep.
And that's where I met my future business partner, Matthew Skidmore. Some of you may know him as well. And when we graduated from U of A, we both joined family businesses not related to real estate. And shortly after that, another friend of ours from college, he's in El Paso, Texas. He moved back there, and he started buying rental properties with his dad in El Paso, Texas. And so that kind of piqued our interest. We're like, what is this guy doing?
Right.
Like, he's getting ahead of us, making more money than us. We got to figure this
competition,
out. So,
yeah.
So that's what initially piqued our interest. This was around year 2000. And so Matthew and I, we weren't licensed at that time, so we hired a realtor. We're like, we want to buy some rental properties. That was our focus at that time. We figured we wanted to buy properties, hold on to them long term, and just build wealth that way. So we didn't really know what we were doing, but we kind of were learning as we go. And we eventually, our realtor found us 2 fourplexes side by side. And we were scared to death to pull the trigger, But getting started is the hardest part because, the last thing you want to do is lose money when you're working hard and making money. To take a step backwards, can be devastating. So that's why I always tell new investors, be patient. That first deal is your most important deal you're ever going to do, because if you have a bad experience on that first deal, there's a chance you may not want to continue. So the real loss is not the money you might lose on the deal, it's the fact that you might not want to invest anymore. So we were really careful. We were ultra safe in our criteria, and I think that was one of the good things at the beginning, is that we were very cautious. Even though we were anxious to get investing, we weren't anxious to the point that we were going to just pull the trigger on any deal and do it. So we finally bought these 2 fourplexes, and we had all these scenarios in our head, like, what if nobody wants to rent it? What if we can't make our payment?
Right.
What if they trash the units? All these things, that you worry about. But we bought it, found out people do want to rent it, people do pay their rent, it's not that bad. And then maybe 6 months later, we got a letter in the mail. And this was before this was kind of a common practice. Now everyone gets letters, I want to buy your house. So we got a letter from an investor that it was actually from a realtor. He's like, I represent an investor who owns this big apartment complex down the street, and we want to buy yours. We're like, oh, let's see what he has to say. And he made us a really, really good offer. I think we made like 60 grand profit. We're like, wow. And that really got us interested in investing more. Obviously, to make that kind of money, quickly had a lot of appeal to us, and we had fun doing it as well too. So we started looking for more properties like that. So we took that money, and then we bought a little 15-unit complex on Alvernon. Just a mishmash of like duplex. There was 3 trailers in the middle, but we were really looking for just like cash flow. And we started building up these rental properties. I don't know, we had maybe 100 units or so at that, after a certain amount of time. And this was around year 2005, 2004, somewhere in there. And those types of properties went up. As you know, at that time, property values really raised quickly at that time. So we were fortunate. We decided we were going to sell a lot of the ones that we could make profit on. It wasn't that we saw this big event coming. I'm not going to say we predicted the crash and we timed it. That's not at all what happened. We sold because we wanted to make profit. the timing happened to be perfect.
Right.
You know, it was, you know, fortunate timing, because in 2006, 2007, for those that weren't around in the market, maybe in real estate, the housing market just crashed. That was the Great Recession. So
Right.
that really was where we saw a big opportunity. I mean, we were previously buying, you know, these rental properties, multi-units, you know, not good areas really.
Right.
Very management intensive properties. And then all of a sudden we're seeing like, oh, we can buy this house that used to be $250,000 a year ago. Now it's getting foreclosed and we can buy it for $60,000. We're like, this is an opportunity.
Right.
At that time, we still had the buy and hold mentality.
Right.
You know, we weren't thinking about flipping the houses at that time.
Right.
So we had heard about, you know, the courthouse auction sale. You know, we didn't know anything about it, but we had heard about it. Like, hey, that's where the best deals are. So we started going downtown and just following what was going on there. It probably took us a good month of just watching people, and you know, the conclusion we came away with is like, you know, these guys keep handing over these $10,000 checks buying these houses. They
Right.
must be making money. So, so we figured it out. Like, we can buy this house, rent it out, get a better return than we were getting on these dumpy apartment
Right.
complexes or even trailer parks. We bought some of those for cash flow. So for us, it was a no-brainer. We wanted to buy these houses and rent them out. The challenge at that time was different than the challenge today. Like the challenge, you know, today is, you know, there's so much competition
Right.
for deals. Everybody is competing for these houses.
Right.
At that time, you know, the market tanked and there was just deals galore. Everywhere you looked, you know, you could just buy a house.
You could pick up whatever you wanted.
Yeah, you really could.
Wow.
But the problem at that time was borrowing money was really difficult.
Right.
You know, the banks weren't lending like they are now.
Okay.
The banks were licking their wounds. You know, they're
Right.
losing $40,000, $50,000, $100,000.
They didn't want to lend back then.
No, they didn't.
Okay, so how did you do that? How did you figure that out?
So once we identified that there was an opportunity, you know, to buy these houses, we started borrowing from private parties. Just we started with friends and family, just people that we knew that had money
Yeah.
sitting in the bank.
Right.
So we offered, you know, an 8% interest rate.
Right.
That's what we pay our private investors. We still pay that today. And the reason that it was easy for them to see what we were doing is
Yeah.
because it wasn't complicated.
Right.
You know, we weren't pooling investor money and trying to build a shopping center or big
Right.
apartment complex. We just explained it very simply. We're going to buy this house, you know, for $60,000. We're
Right.
going to borrow money from you. We're going to record a loan on this house, so you know, your loan is secured just like a bank's loan would
Right.
be. And we're going to fix it up, and then we're going to sell it.
So they didn't see they didn't have the fear. I mean, the market was taking a crap, right? Here you are, you're going back into an industry where it has just seen its worst crisis ever, right?
Right.
And then so they had faith in you guys to say, okay, your numbers make sense. I know what you're doing. We'll go ahead and invest with you.
Right, exactly. And you know, an 8% return was
Right.
a solid return for
Yeah.
them. And they could see like, okay, my house is secured by, my loan is secured by this house. It's also backed by Matthew and Kyle, you
Right,
know.
right.
They know what they're doing. And,
Yeah.
and they could see it wasn't a super risky investment.
Were you guys flipping them there, or were you just buying and holding and
We
renting?
initially wanted to buy and hold, but we quickly realized, like, if we keep buying these houses and renting them out, we're
Right.
going to just run out of money. We won't be able to do any more deals. So
Ah.
what we did was we started keeping the best houses for rentals, the ones that were the cheapest, the ones
Right.
that had the most equity in them,
Smart
and the ones
move.
that would have the most cash flow.
Right.
So we would keep those, and then the more expensive ones we would flip, you know, make profits, and then that would allow us to buy more rental properties.
So even in like the worst time of the market, when you're purchasing houses for $60,000, $80,000, people were still buying. Like you were still able to, you know, renovate them a little bit, fix them up, put them back on the market, and make profit.
Right. We were, and a lot of people at that time, I think that was kind of a misconception, and I think it's always a misconception when there's a market shift, is that, you know, houses stop selling.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought. Yeah,
people would, you know, some people thought we were crazy, like why, and you know, the houses are declining in value, the market has crashed.
Yeah.
Everything is, you know, we're in this huge recession.
Right.
Why would you be buying a whole bunch of houses? But the reality is, houses still sell. There's never been a period in time where, you know, nobody sells their house.
Right.
You know, people have to move.
Right.
Life goes on. I mean, even during a recession. Granted, they weren't selling for nearly as high prices as they once were. Maybe they weren't selling as fast as they were. So at that time, we were competing with REO sales. So at that time, we just remodeled every house. Our philosophy, this is year 2009. So our philosophy was, you know, it is a tough market to sell in. So the house needs to look nice. Let's fix it up, remodel it, make it move-in ready for a home buyer, and you know, make it look better than all these other bank-owned properties, short sales. So it actually wasn't difficult to sell the houses because of that.
So that formula is still the same today, right? As inventory becomes, obviously, it starts to inventory increase. There's more competition. It's more important now than ever to have good presentation, maybe even staged, depending on the price point.
Right.
I mean, because
we're getting back into that. And then things started to
Right.
change as the market started to stabilize, and you know, house prices started to go up. And then when the interest rates started to go down, they went down, you know, to historic lows. I mean, for a while we were under 3% for a 30-year fixed mortgage.
Right.
And then the house prices took off, and then once real estate stabilized, then you started seeing big money come into the space.
Right.
And that was something that Matthew, my partner, and I, when we were buying these houses and renting them, we do take a lot of pleasure in just realizing that we kind of beat these big companies to this gold rush, so to speak. Right. Because houses really, at around 2010, 11, 12, then big money started realizing, like, hey, there's an opportunity here.
Right.
You know, they viewed this house as a commodity.
Right.
And you know, so now you have all these big companies, iBuyers, you know, institutional funds, putting their money in these houses, granted at much higher prices. So once that happened, you know, housing really took off. Right. So at that time, then there was a time when, like, the housing market was so strong, you didn't need to remodel the houses, make them look great.
They would just sell anyways, like hotcakes. They would just go and put them on. They were good.
And so now that you know, the market is starting to slow down and get a little soft, I think we're back at that stage again where we are better off to you know, have the best house to make sure it's going to sell. So now we're still doing that formula, like you said, doing full remodels to make the house look. So
before we fast forward to like present time, let's talk about, like, because to me, KMS they established the whole, like, turn and burn, and like you guys had the same style throughout all your houses, right? Right. We walked into a house, I don't know if you guys remember, when you walk into a KMS house, you would say literally, this is a KMS house, you know, and you guys had your own, you know, but it was a great palette. Like you guys created something that was really cool. You guys brought in the gray tones and all that stuff. So you really didn't veer off the formula. Was that strategic for you guys to have everything sort of be in the same palette and the same style? It wasn't strategic in the sense that we wanted our houses to look, you know, homogeneous. It was the fact that we're doing such a high volume, you know, that we had to do it for operational reasons. Right. And that's why, like, when we get a unique house where we can't just put our package in and have our contractors say, okay, do the same thing you always do, then I'll call Gabe. I'll just be like, Gabe, this one we can't handle. We made that mistake once. Like, we bought a house by U of A, you know, Sam Hughes, great historic home. Right. And, you know, we have so many going on, our contractors just put our regular package in. It was a total mismatch. And so what was the feedback on that? First, like, 2 days on the market, an agent calls me up and just
rips me a new one for like, you guys ruined this house.
Yeah.
And she was right. I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't argue. And I explained to her, like, well, this is the reason, this is why we do it. And you're right, we could have probably done a better job on that had we, you know, been more attentive to it. But, you know, that's what happened. That's why we ended up having coffee, and she wanted to do deals with me after that. But it worked out fine. But yeah, we have our niche in flipping, and that was kind of one of the points that when I'm talking to a group like this, you know, some people think that, well, you know, you have to do, you know, so many houses, and, you know, all the, you know, bigger guys in the market are getting all the deals. There's no deals for us. That's a big fallacy that I hear. I mean, the market is so big, you know, Tucson and beyond. And Tucson is just a really good place to do this type of business that we're in. So yes, we might be more competitive on some houses, you know, certain types that if we're going head to head with somebody, we may have an advantage. But there's a lot of houses like that you buy to flip that I'm not competitive on, just because knowing those things, they take so much attention to detail. It's going to take so much time to remodel this. We're not willing to spend that type of time or have those kind of resources to devote to it, to do it properly. So because of that, that was kind of something that led us to transition to another, you know, business that we do in terms of lending. The last 4 or 5 years, we started lending to other investors that are in the market here. We started doing joint ventures like we do with you and others, and you know, that was a way for us to, you know, participate in projects and utilize capital that we have access to, but not have to, you know, do everything ourselves. So it was kind of a win-win.
So you guys started to leverage. You guys did so this is what I love about what he does really well, and I really didn't understand it until I first met Kyle, but he understands the power of collaboration, leveraging your business, right? He knows, and then the fact that you said this in the very beginning when we met, you said there's enough business in this town for everybody, and I'm like, because I didn't want to tell him what my house was I was looking at, and I'll be like, Kyle, I don't want you to take this house from me, you know, and I was worried about telling them information. But, you know, and I'm like, Kyle, what if I want to borrow money, but the house? And he's like, oh no, if we know, that'll work out. And it did. So I really appreciate it, because there is a ton of business in this town for everybody to get into this business if this is something you truly want to do. Now, what I was getting into. So collaboration is a big thing. I don't want to jump too much forward. I want to get to that because I think that's really important when we're talking about the collaboration, joint ventures, because that's kind of how I started with you, was doing joint ventures. But before we go there, let's talk a little about kind of the facts here. So you've been in business since 2000, right? Right. You started KMS Enterprises with Matt.
That's right.
And then can you guys guess how many, I know you may have already seen this, if you've already seen the screen, how many flips has he done, have they done since 2000? Give me a guess.
I'd say 2,500.
Okay.
Good guess.
Good guess. And you've done how many?
A little over 3,000.
So 3,000 flips. If you do the math, that's freaking impressive, because I know in the first couple of years you weren't flipping.
Yeah, we started off with just, you know, the first one.
Yeah.
And it kind of built on.
So if you do the math on that, which I did earlier, and I'm sure you guys will do later, it's like 168 flips a year. You know, considering that's if you did it from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But now, what are you guys typically flipping in the last couple of years?
Well, the last few years, I think we've been buying consistently about 300 houses that we fix and flip. And granted, some of those are, you know, with joint ventures and partners and things like that. And,
yeah. But that's 300 deals.
And we've kind of branched a little outside of Tucson the last few years, and we've had partners that are in other states as well.
How many states are you in now?
We've done deals in, I think, about 17 states, but right now we're focusing on Florida. We have a couple of really good operational partners there, which, by the way, that's a really good market.
Right.
We identified that as a good market because their prices are kind of like where Tucson was 5-6 years ago.
Wow.
You know, we were buying, good rental houses here for
Right.
100, 125,000,
Right.
150,000. Now you can't, touch anything like that. So there's certain regions of the country where you can still do that.
Right.
And, it's kind of our belief that eventually these
Right.
other regions are going to catch up to, like the Western United States where housing has really increased.
Yeah.
So we see that as a good long-term place
Right.
to invest.
Right. So when you say you identify it, like, how would that come to mind? What are you seeing that you say Florida was a great place to start investing in? Let's
Yeah,
go
well,
on.
it's not that we sought out Florida. They these two guys sought us out. They were
Yeah.
wholesalers, and they were in Florida buying houses, and then they started sourcing houses in Tucson using their kind of marketing methods,
Right.
and that's how they met us. They
okay.
sold us some properties and kind of got to know these guys. They're real good guys.
Yeah.
And they said, kind of what you said a little bit. They're like, we're working for this company and we want to do what you guys are doing and be the investor, not working for a company making them, a lot of money, but we don't have access to the capital that we need.
Right.
So we partnered up. We became their capital partner, and we have about 150 rentals with them in Florida, and we flipped about that same number of houses.
Wow. And
So,
that's
yeah.
just in the last, how many years would you say
It's
there?
about a 3-year period.
Yeah, that's really good. So now talking about rentals, how does your rental portfolio look now with KMS?
So our rental portfolio, we've been building it gradually.
Yeah.
We started buying single family homes for rental in 2009.
Yeah.
So we've just been, like I said, kind of keeping the best ones that we could and building it.
Yeah.
We have about 500 in Tucson, and then we've got another 300 or so out of state with partners.
Why so little? No, that's incredible. So now looking back then, so you got the flip side, you got the rental side, the buy and hold. Is there one that you value more? I mean, do you like the flip more? Or do they kind of play an equal part in your business?
I think if somebody's going to invest, like make it a full-time business for themselves, I think those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I think they complement each other.
Right.
Like if you want to do flipping as a business, then I think you should also do rentals.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. If you want to buy rentals long term and hold them, build a rental portfolio, I think you should also flip. The reason I say that is because if you're good at either of those,
Right.
you're going to come across opportunities that fit the other better.
Yeah.
So if like these, and that's why I think like even these big companies that are, buying thousands of houses to rent them out, that means they're looking at tens of thousands of opportunities.
Right.
Some of those opportunities probably wouldn't be good as rentals, but they would be good as flips.
Right. It's just a volume thing. They're just grabbing anything. Yeah.
So I think it goes hand in hand.
Okay. Good. That's great. Okay. So maybe we should talk a little bit about the joint venture and opportunities that you do with lending. What I didn't realize is that when I first met you is that you gave opportunity to people if they brought a good deal, right?
Right.
They always say that if you have the deal, the money comes, right? Would you say that?
That's right.
And I think what you do, which is mind-boggling to me, is that you'll look at a person, right? And it was kind of like a short conversation. All right, what do you do? What's your intention? What do your numbers look like? And then we look at the deal, and it's like, all right, we could do it. I'm like, when you go to a bank, it's going to take you a month to get a loan. So tell me about what does it look like for somebody here if they found a deal and they wanted to do either a joint venture with you or they just wanted to get a straight loan. What does that look like,
Right.
the process?
So that was something that kind of just happened organically in our business. It wasn't like one day we sat down and were like, we need to get in the lending business because we
Right.
think there's money in that. That was something that just developed naturally. Being in the market so long, having contact with so many realtors, flippers, wholesalers, investors, we realized like, hey, these guys, these people, gals and guys, can find deals.
Right.
And like I said, there's so many deals out there that we're not going to capture no matter how
Right.
far we look. But what we realized is a lot of people were really capital constrained, and that was preventing them from even really looking for deals. So many people say to themselves, well, you know, I could flip a house, but I just don't have the money.
Right.
And that's why, like what you just said, I always like to tell people that if you can find, don't worry about the money. If you can find a good deal, the money will always be there for you, whether it's from me or somebody else.
Right.
For good deals, there's always money, so don't worry about that. You know, yes, it does take a lot of capital to get in the flipping business, but there's a lot of capital out there. So what we did a little bit differently that kind of differentiated ourselves and helped us kind of build our lending business was that since we were already in the flipping business, we could look at a flip and determine very quickly, like, okay, yes, we can do a loan. Yes, we'll lend you the full purchase price. We'll lend you even the repair funds, so you don't have to come in with any money.
Right.
That's different than a lot of hard money lenders. The typical hard money lender, they're looking at the deal and they're thinking, well, I don't want to get this property back, so the best way for me to protect myself is to make the borrower come in with a down payment, the whole skin in the game concept, which in theory is good, but the problem with that is it really limits from an investor standpoint how many projects they can do. That's fine, you know, if you're going to save your money and do one deal, but the people that really benefit from working with us are people that kind of want to do multiple projects, you know, have you know, multiple projects going on, because if you know, if you're putting in the remodel, your average remodel is 60, 70,000 and your hard money lender's making you fund that, you know, if you have 3 or 4 deals going, you could have $500,000 out of your own money at any one time.
Right.
So once people realize, like, okay, I can do deals without having to bring in this big down payment, without having to fund the remodel myself, that really motivated them to go out there and find these opportunities, which are, you know, really all over town. So
yeah, and I think that's a really good point, is that, you know, we did traditional financing in the beginning, and then we went to Kyle and we did 100%, which allowed, you know, us, when we were doing that, is to leverage, right? Instead of doing one property, you can now do 4 to 5. So it's just being able to scale your business, obviously being really smart about what you're buying, being really good about figuring out your rehab expenses and making sure that you're profitable. But if one does not perform as best as you think it was going to do, you have the other 4, right? Where one could, if you're doing one at a time, one can break you right off the bat, you know? So I was able to do that with that type of financing, which I thought was great.
Right.
Yeah. So you know, I'd love to get into Q&A with you guys. I'm sure you guys have some questions. Don't be shy. Ask them anything you want, right?
Right.
Everything. Any questions? Good, right?
I'm an open book.
All right. He's an open book. So if you want to talk about his financials, you can, and whatever it is that you want. But yeah, anybody got any questions?
What makes a good rental for you?
I get that question a lot, and it's a good question. For me, what makes the first thing that I look for is I want to get a rental that I can eventually have the bank finance everything for me and not have my own money in. So, for instance, say you want to buy a rental property right now. You call Jessica up. Hey, Jessica, what's your program right now? Well, I can do an 80% loan. Which, can you do an 80% loan on an investment property? Right, or is it 7? You can? But that's 75%. Right, 75. So if you're buying it, that means you're going to have 25% down payment. You might find a good rental property and it'll cash flow, and you have the 25% down. Great, you got a good rental house. But the problem is, what if you find a second one, a third one? You know, can you keep putting 25% down and buying more rental houses? So the way that we do it is we buy a house. We don't go to Jessica first. We go. We'll buy it with our own money, but then we'll put, like what I was talking about, our private investors on it. So we'll buy it at a lower price, we'll make improvements to it, and then when we refinance it, the goal is to have our, you know, investment paid back. So for instance, like when we first started buying rental houses, we could get a house for $75,000. You can't do that now, but I'm using it for this example. We wanted to buy a house if we're going to rent it, and at that time the banks were more conservative. They said, we'll only lend you 70%. So we'd buy it for, that means if we want to get our money back, we have to buy it for 70. After we fix it and rent it, it must appraise for 100,000. So the bank gives us a $70,000 loan. We got all our money back. And so for me, that's the most important criteria. Buy something that has equity in it, or that you can build equity into it, you know, improve it and bring the value up. And then after that, the second criteria is obviously it has to, you know, make a monthly cash flow every month. So if you can do that, if you can buy a house, and rent it, refinance it, and then get your money back.
So you're not just covering the mortgage, you're.
Right. Mm-hmm. So obviously, the higher your loan payment, you know, the more of that a cushion you want it to be. It's gotten a lot harder in Tucson to get rental properties. Like, you know, like the bulk of our portfolio was built up, you know, prior to this big run up. So we're not buying as many rentals as we once were, but I lend to a lot of people that are really creative. So that's another application of hard money. So people come to me, they don't want to just necessarily flip a house. They say, okay, I want to buy this house or duplex or fourplex. I'll borrow the money from you. I'll fix it up, I'll rent it out, and then I'm going to refinance it, pay off your loan with a high interest rate, and then I have a permanent loan, you know, at a much lower interest rate that's cash flowing. So that's a really good way to do rentals. You know, the prices have gone up in Tucson, but also so have the rents.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's something that I haven't really been focusing on, but people that I lend to have kind of opened my eyes to it, is that like they'll buy a duplex and, you know, they'll deck it out, update it, and then by doing that they get top of the market rents.
Yeah.
And even with all these rentals, I'm surprised at how much some of these rents are going for.
I mean, I did that same method with you. I got the one on Bermuda as a fourplex. It was a dump. Bought it at 230, put 75 into it, refinanced. The bank gave me 300, got all my money back out, and it cash flows like $2,000 above what I paid.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
So
right.
It is harder to find that,
Right.
but you find it a little easier when you get into multifamily. It makes it a little more easier to do it.
So that's a good use of hard money.
Right.
Yes, no one likes paying double-digit interest rates.
Yeah.
You know, it can
Yeah.
get kind of unnerving,
Yep.
and it is risky if you don't do it properly.
Right.
But that's a perfect example
Yeah.
of, for a very short term, how you utilize that, you know, hard money loan, and now you have a, you know, asset that's going to generate money for you every month.
Yeah.
And,
It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's a numbers game. So if the numbers make sense and you get all your money back out and then you're getting paid on top of that,
Yes.
what does it matter?
So I think those are the things to look for. Like if you can have something with equity, so that, you know.
Buy low, cash out.
Yeah. And it's also called like
Exactly.
the Burr method, right?
Yeah, that's what they call it now.
Did you create that? I feel like you did.
We were doing
So,
it
yeah.
before they called it that,
Yeah.
but that's kind of a clever little
So,
acronym.
So Burr method, for, you know, those who don't know it, it's buy, you renovate, refinance, and repeat. So, and the whole point is to get your money all back out to be able to do it again to another property, right?
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
That's kind of what we did early on. And
So you invented
been
it.
doing
I knew it.
I don't know if we invented it, but we did it before. It's called the Burr.
Before it was popular.
Oh, thank you.
That's good. Let me grab one. Thank you. Thanks. All right, guys. What are the questions? Come on. Let's bring them on.
I'll ask one. Do you guys do any VRBOs? And
Ooh.
do you have an opinion in regards to renting it out traditionally?
We don't. That's not something I have familiarity with. It's something that's caught my attention lately just from people talking about them so much. Some of the people that we lend to do that. So, you know, instead of refinancing, you know, and then just renting it long term, they will do a VRBO. I mean, some of the numbers on that are really eye-catching. My, concern, I mean, everything I've heard is just been anecdotal. Like, I'm crushing it. Like, the gem show, I'm killing it. Like, I do get that. But what I'd like to see, for me to be a firm believer, is I'd like to see 2 years of operating history, 12 months all the way through. I mean, I understand during the winter and spring, you can get some really high monthly rents. But what I don't know is what you get, July, August, September. We did a 2 or 3 years ago. This was before like property values rose. And what we found was, we did have some months where they made more, and it was nice. But then we had some down months, more vacancy loss than what we would normally have. And then at the end of the day, we weren't really making that much more than we did if we had just rented it for 12 months at a unfurnished rental rate. So we made the decision like, well, it's not worth the extra work if we're not getting extra return. But the market's vastly different than when we tried it before. So I would like to see someone who has done it consistently, like I said, for at least 12, preferably 2 years, and just look at the operating history. I mean, one of the things I like about the VRBO concept is you can buy a higher price home and make the numbers work. And that has appealed to me because, especially when the interest rates were really low, for a while you could get, non-owner-occ loans in the 4s. So why waste one of those loans on, $150,000 house if you could buy a $500,000 house, borrow that cheap money, and then still cash flow? So I'd like to see, some numbers before I become a firm believer in that. But it definitely has my interest. So have you done any, Gabe?
VRBO. So we looked at it. We ran the numbers on those, and they're phenomenal. But we kind of went away from it. The interest rates rose too fast recently. That kind of threw our numbers out. So once that kind of changed things a little bit too. So with keeping properties, the rates are something we're keeping an eye out. We just got to buy a little more aggressively, and I think it'll still fit the model. But you got to be smart about where you're at. I know we have a lot of guests here today. I'm just curious. What is it what made you come to this event? What is it that you're looking for? Or what was the appeal of being here today?
I wanted to meet the guy that led me.
Yeah.
See the guy in person?
Meet him in person, I heard?
I just said see him in person.
See him in person? Okay. What else?
Well, I mean, it's obviously it's an inspirational story, and we all see the data. The data is out there. We have access to the data, and it's very interesting. That's it. Basically you.
Yeah. And it's pretty interesting. Yeah, and that's a great point because the interesting part of, what I look at when I see Kyle is like what they built, Kyle and Matt, here in, that it happened here in Tucson, right? This is like, when you look at it scale-wise nationally, what they've done privately as a, 2 guys in the company versus a corporation, what they're able to scale and do here is pretty impressive, right? And I think that's something to say about what you've done correctly. I love how you guys stay in your lane. When I ask Kyle what he's doing, he's like, I'm in the office. I'm sitting on a computer. I'm analyzing deals all day. That's all he does. But he stays in his lane. And I think we're all trying to learn. When you take that concept, you apply it to any type of business, is you stay in your lane, you figure out a formula, and you repeat it where it becomes something that's, you don't think about every day, and all of a sudden you got a machine, right? And I think that's what I continue trying to learn from you is, what is it that you do? You try to figure out the secret sauce, but at the end of the day, I think it's just sticking to your guns, being consistent.
It really is a consistency thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And what could you say about mindset with you guys? I mean, I know at this point you probably feel pretty like you guys can do almost anything, right? But in the beginning, what would you say your mindset was, and how did you surpass any obstacles? Because I'm sure it's never been it's not always been perfect, right? I'm sure first of all, let's talk about what are some obstacles that you guys went through. If there's one that you want to share, and then how did you get past it?
So I mean, I think the obstacle at the beginning when we started like buying these houses, that's when I feel like our business really took a turn for the better. Was you know, that crash created this opportunity. I mean, the obstacle was that we didn't really know much about what we were doing. So,
Right.
you know, how do you buy these houses, you know, and make money off them? So we had to kind of set up systems, and you know, we didn't really know the system. So I think that was really the biggest obstacle. You know,
Right.
we didn't take some class where someone said, okay, just follow these steps, and,
Right.
you know, you're going to be flipping houses in no time. So we just took the time to really do it. I mean, we started, you know, everything ourselves. We looked at every house ourselves. You know, to this day, I still do all the comping and make all
Yeah.
the purchase decisions. And so
Right.
we came up with systems, and we've really followed those systems, and we've been, you know, strict to adhering to them. So, you know, once we found out what worked for us,
Yeah.
then we wanted to just do as much of that as we could. If something didn't work for us, you know, we wanted to cut that out and not do it at all. So I would say that that's like the biggest challenge. When you're getting started, you don't have those systems in place for,
Right.
you know, how do you evaluate a flip to know if it's a good flip? How do you evaluate it if it's a good rental? So I'd encourage people, if you are, you know, really interested in, you know, doing more of it or getting into it as a business, take the time to come up with your system, you know,
Right.
and you know, and once you have that system, if you can flip 1 or 2 houses, you could flip 10 houses.
Right.
You know, but you know, if you don't take the time to you know, put that together, you might not be able to flip the 1 or 2 houses. So
I think sometimes going into something naive, like not knowing, is sometimes the best way to go into it. You know, I heard a story one time of a guy who flipped 100 houses in his first year. And then when they asked him why the hell would he have flipped 100? He said because he didn't know if that wasn't a thing that was hard to do, right? Sometimes what you put in your head is the biggest obstacle from you flipping 1 to 100, right? So it's important, and this is what I like having these conversations with you, because when you meet Kyle, you're just like, this dude's a normal guy. Like I could miss him out in like passing in public, right? Not right. And I mean that in the most genuine, nice way. You know, and I think people who have met him and talked to him before say the same thing. Like, Kyle's just not what I thought he was going to be. You know, I thought he was a guy sitting on a throne somewhere with a computer. You know, I don't know, casting people off the island and stuff. But you know, that's what I appreciate about it, and that's why you're so approachable, and that's why it's so nice to learn from you.
But that's one of the reasons why I always like talking to groups of agents like this, is because it's not difficult for people like you to segue into what we're doing. Maybe, you know, you don't want to do it to that level, you know, to that degree, but you're already very close to if you want to flip a house or buy rentals, you know, and I wouldn't say that to people who know nothing about real
Right.
estate, you
Right.
know, because really, like, a lot of these opportunities come to you through the normal course of your business. So that's why I like to talk to agents, to, you know, because a lot of them realize, like, okay, when these opportunities come my way, instead of passing on it or passing it along to somebody else, maybe I can capitalize on this. So, you know, flipping houses, it doesn't take any type of special, you know, power or expertise.
Yeah.
It really comes down to like 3 just basic fundamental things. You know, the first thing is finding a deal, and that's where I think a lot of agents have an advantage over regular people,
Right.
is because people are calling you for houses, you know, help. You know, I've got this house that you know, I inherited and needs help. What do I do with it?
Right.
That's an opportunity right there. You know, the second thing of flipping is having the capital to buy it. You know, we've already talked about that. That's not really a problem, because you can borrow the money. You just have to build in that expense properly so that, you know, you have enough, you know, margin to make a profit and
Right.
pay, you know, for your cost of capital. And then the third thing is just having the ability to get it fixed up.
Right.
And I found a lot of people, maybe have one or two of those things, but they're missing, that third thing. They're all equally important. You can't do one without the other. So that's kind of where we stepped in and helped people. Like, what is it that you need help with? I can help you with both two of the three things.
Right.
I can't find a deal for you, but if you find one, I could fund it for you. We can partner. KMS can remodel it for you, and you can participate as a partner, for bringing the deal.
Yeah.
So there's ways to participate without, having to do everything yourself. And I think just the people in this room, will come across opportunities without even trying.
Yeah, I agree. We preach the same thing.
So if we come across one of these opportunities, what steps do we take to get them to you? Like, how do we?
Yeah, so you can contact me. I always tell people it's a pretty simple process. I mean, I evaluate, these opportunities all the time, so it's very easy for me to do it quickly. Like if you need a quick answer, I basically just need to know the property address, the purchase price, what's your renovation budget, and then pretty much from there, if you have pictures, I can make a decision. Okay, this I think is a good investment, one that I like or not. And then from there, you make the decision. Would you prefer to just borrow money, hard money, run the project yourself, and it's 100% yours, all the profit goes to you, and I'm just a lender? Or do you prefer to do a joint venture structure where we become partners? If you want to remodel the house, okay, that we can do it that way, or if KMS remodels the house, we can do it that way. So there's pros and cons of both. I like to give people the choice and just tell them, run the numbers, calculate which way would be more profitable for you, and go with that choice. So that's really all I need is just those things, and then from there we can determine, if it's a project that we like, and if it is, we can fund it very quickly, and either be partners on it, or you're the borrower and it's your deal.
Right, and we just email it to you then? Or?
Yeah.
So you'll stick around right after, and you can talk to anybody, give your email out,
Absolutely.
and
Yep.
phone number,
Right. Yep.
address.
Yep. You come on over.
No, yeah. Jess.
So I'm not even a real estate agent, I'm a lender, and I've worked with Kyle and Matt for probably about a little over a year now. And the first house that I came across was through Facebook. Somebody was just like, hey, I know you're a real estate agent, which I'm not. I'm always like,
Okay.
but I'm a real estate investor, I'd love to see it. And long story short, I offered him $100,000 for the house. And I had no idea what I was going to do. But he was like, no, that's cool. Like, I can fix it up myself. I'm like, all right, well, the offer still stands. I can get you the cash in 2 weeks. Well, he called me back in like a month, and he's like, hey, does that offer still stand? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, hang up the phone. I'm like, oh shit, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get $100,000? Like, I didn't know Kyle at the time or Matt. And so I called Gabe. Gabe was actually the first person I called. And I'm like, dude, I got this flip. I see on Facebook you do flips. Like, how do we structure this? And he's like, walked me through it. I ended up partnering with KMS on it just completely. Like, they funded everything. We did the contract. My name wasn't on it at all. And like, crickets for like 6 months, and then I get a wire transfer for $40,000.
Yeah.
Dang. So that got me like addicted.
Yeah.
Jessica, I have a question for you. Do you seek out these opportunities, or do they just come your way?
The crazy thing, no, I don't. Like, I don't actively post.
Because you've done several. Like you were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, now we have an assisted living home that has, like, we're not quite sure what to do with it yet, but it has to have at least $250,000 in equity. Same thing, like, so the power of giving, right? I gave to this dude's GoFundMe. Like, I'm a sucker for the GoFundMe. Like, no intention on ever having anything reciprocated to me. Well, like a year later, his mom had passed away, and he had inherited this assisted living home. He's like, hey, I know you're a real estate agent. Like, I want to know if you want to list this property. And so I said, yeah, I'd love to come look at it. I'm not an agent. I know some badass agents if I need to hook you up with one, but I'm a real estate investor. Go there, give them a cash offer, or like, I honestly encourage them, like, dude, put this on the market. Like, evict your residents and put it on the market. It didn't work for him because he gave the cash right away. So I was like, okay, so what I'll do is I'll offer you this amount. It was like $395, and
Wow.
And so I don't have the means to pay for that financially, so I reached out to Matt and Kyle, and sure enough, within 7 days, they had the money wire transferred to this guy's account, and that's, we've done several.
But you're a perfect example of what I'm talking about, Jessica. Just being a high producing lender, you know a lot of people, you're talking to a lot of people, and these opportunities, you could have easily said, I don't know what to do with an assisted living home. That's too much money, I'm gonna pass. And that would have been, a big one that you passed on. So that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. And the realtor network is really powerful. Like, people ask us, well, how do you get so many deals? Like, at first it was just the trustee sale. We just drive downtown, they were foreclosures everywhere, but that dried up. There's hardly any foreclosures anymore, but we still buy a lot of houses every month. And a big part of that is just being a realtor for 20 years and knowing so many agents. A lot of agents just call me up. So that's something I'd encourage. Just talk to agents. If you tell agents, like, hey, I'm in this, I'm looking for this, this is what I want, like, call me, they will call you.
Yeah.
Jen is a really good example of that. She's super active. Like, I don't, she's always sending me, hey, I have this property, look at this property. Like, and she's a master networker. She just talks to agents and she makes it known, this is what I'm looking for.
Right.
Call me if you have something like this. And they do.
Right.
So the agent network is really powerful. Lean on that.
Yeah.
Make it known, like, what you're looking for, and these opportunities will just start coming to you. It's not going to be just like lucky happenstance. It's being active.
Right.
So.
Well, yeah. If you don't voice what you're doing, nobody will ever hear. Right. It's as simple as that. And too many of us kind of sit on the sidelines and we say, oh, I want to do this, right? I love to do this one day, but nobody knows. If you don't tell people what your expectations and what you're looking for, then they'll never know to tell you when the opportunity comes. So that's great. All right, any other questions, guys, before?
Hey, so I noticed that you like to go different places in different markets based off of the availability of properties and obviously the profitability of them. If I have like properties in, say, Hawaii, that we're getting from probate or from divorces, and they're so far under market, but Hawaii's got a really, really high price point, and we're buying them at really, really low prices. Is that something you'd be willing to entertain?
I'll look at anything. I mean,
But
I will say it's harder for me to identify a deal. So I always say, if you want to buy in Hawaii, you have to convince me, even sitting here in Tucson, that I can see this is a good deal. If I can recognize it as being a good deal sitting where I'm sitting, then I'll do it.
That makes sense.
So yeah, we're interested in other markets. That's really, like, we don't have the ability to go into multiple markets by ourselves. It's just too much manpower and more work than we're wanting to do. But I like to spread the word. If you know somebody in Hawaii that is flipping or investing and can find deals, sure, I'd like to talk to them, and we can.
What I'm looking for is because we have apparatuses all over this country, in Montana, even in Hawaii, some in Florida, as you were saying, but they're the little guys like me who are out there finding the deals and whatnot, and based off of the purchase prices in the area and whatnot. That's and we're looking to branch out, and as you said, one of those three main options is the financing and capital, and that's what we're running into, is that wall, the capital wall.
Right.
So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and that's the other thing, you don't have to limit it to Tucson. I know, like, a lot of agents know agents in other cities. If they're looking for capital, we're not opposed to looking at other markets. So.
Anything else, guys? Anything else?
So as a person who's never obviously done a flip before myself, what would be your advice as far as like calculating rehab costs? Like, if I were to bring you a deal and this is the size of the house, this area, what would be the calculation?
I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and I see that's a mistake that, like, new people make when trying to flip houses. They don't really know their numbers. They're kind of guessing. The less guessing you can do, the better. I mean, You don't want to be guessing on what price you can sell it for and how much it's going to cost to remodel. Some people just, they skip steps, and that's where they get in trouble. They may be like, well, this is an awesome area. I want to flip this house. I can buy it. Yes, it's a great area, but is the price right? Or, this house is totally trashed. I know I can make it beautiful and it's going to be awesome. I should flip it. Well, but it all comes down to numbers. I don't really care about any of the other stuff. So it is important to know what your cost is going to be before you buy the house. Sometimes that's hard to do, because these deals go quickly. You have to make quick decisions. Like if a wholesaler sends you this opportunity, okay, you have to make a decision. So I would just know who you're going to use. Like I wouldn't buy the house and then figure out who the contractor is going to be. I wouldn't recommend to somebody to do a flip unless it's like a light cosmetic one without having their contractor lined up ahead of time. And once you do that, you'll find like the house renovation costs are going to fall within a pretty narrow range. The more you do it, the more you look at it, the more familiar you'll get with it. Like, we started off buying foreclosures where you couldn't even go in the house. It was occupied, all the shades are closed. And at the beginning, it's very unnerving because we're like, what if we open the door and the house is just totally destroyed? But after doing a certain amount, we realized like, okay, if it's an old 1960 house, it doesn't really matter if they trashed it or not because we're going to redo everything anyway. So you get a pretty good idea, but I think that would be a good challenge. If it's your first flip, just err on the side of caution. If you think it's going to be a $50,000 remodel, maybe put a $5,000 cushion in there so that you're
like
not
20%.
surprised on the other side.
Should put like 20% on
20%.
that. But I think that scenario would be to bring them a deal, JV the deal with you. That way your guys can do it if it's a great deal. And then that way you can follow along and see how the project went. Because it does take time to figure out remodels.
But that's another thing that we do. Because like even if someone wants to borrow the funds from me, I'm evaluating that property as if I'm buying it. So we've done enough homes that I know if someone says, hey, I want to buy this house, I'm going to do a $20,000 remodel and I'm going to sell it for this price. I'll tell somebody like, to sell it for that price, there's no way you're going to only spend $20,000. That you have to increase that. So yeah, I mean, I'll give you guidance on that too. Give you some direction if I think you're off on the numbers. But if we're doing a joint venture, then we would renovate it on our side, and then we will provide a cost breakdown showing what everything costs, and then. You do enough, you start to learn, and you're evaluating these houses.
Would that be like a recommendation to like JV your first deal?
It just depends. I mean, if you have a crew that you feel like you can count on, and it's a really good deal with a lot of profit margin in it, that'd be one I'd recommend. Do it yourself. You'll probably make more money that way. If you don't really have a crew that you've vetted and that you can count on, then yeah, it might be a good idea to JV that one, and we can handle the remodel. It's going to look like all our other houses, if you don't mind that. But
at least you'll see the process. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I think the learning experience, even if you you do the deal where, the bigger chunk or half or whatever it is goes to them. I think the learning process of understanding that is by far where you'll win. But it's up to you.
Can I have one last thing?
Yeah.
So talk about collaboration. Like Gabe is also the best resource. So I got my funding from KMS, but I called Gabe. I'm like, the first one I did on my own. I'm like, dude, I'm filling out a SPUDS and they're asking me if stuff's permitted. Like I didn't permit any of this because I don't know. Like I've never flipped a house before. So he like talked to me through that and what you need to get permitted and all this stuff because it was all so foreign to me. Contractors, I'm like, because my husband put in a lot of sweat equity, it'll save you a lot of money if you can do this stuff yourself. But it got to a point where some of the things he couldn't do, so Gabe was the one I called, like, hey, who do you use for this? Hey, I see you're flipping a house down the street. Like, what do you think that's gonna go for? Because once that appraises, that's gonna bring up my collaborated as well, even though he like had no financial gain in it whatsoever, was a wealth of knowledge, answered so many questions for me, like through the first couple that we did together, all just out of the goodness of his heart. So.
Thanks. I'm waiting for my check, but thank you.
I have two
Yeah.
little questions.
Sure.
Something that Jessica just kind of touched on. So liability is one question, which I'll ask second. The first is, on average, from acquisition to completion, more or less, what's a good, how many days?
For us, our average is about 9 months. You know, it can
You say
vary.
9 months to flip a house?
Yes. I mean, that could be less, you know, obviously if it's a lighter cosmetic remodel, newer house. But that also includes some of the houses we buy still have occupants in them, so we might have to vacate them. But that's another thing where I see people underestimate is like they might build in 6 months for a full remodel from start to finish to sale. That's hard to do. I mean, I'm not saying it can't be done, but if you're gonna buy a house that's a full renovation, get that fixed up, and then have it sold and the money returned in 6 months, I'll tip my cap to you. That's pretty good if you can do that. So, you know, build it in, you know, a longer holding cost when you're doing your projections. Because, you know, especially if you're using hard money, it's very expensive. If you're figuring, well, I'm gonna have this thing done in 6 months, you know, maybe you do get it in escrow and it's scheduled to close in 6 months, the buyer's loan gets denied, it goes back on the market, you know, the interest rates are increasing, it takes you longer. So I would say build in more holding costs. I see that a lot of investors don't have enough cushion for the carrying costs.
And my second question is, you know, as obviously, you know, one of us buys a property, we don't know anything about the property, right? We know nothing. We don't care anything. We buy the property, and you know, we remodel the property. Whatever is to our knowledge is what we see when we start remodeling, right?
Right.
So you know, we don't see a lot of things. Is there any liability? I mean, obviously there's some liability. Have you seen any examples of extreme stories, any stories on that?
I mean, I'm of the opinion that if you just do things right, you don't have to really worry too much about, like, is this going to come back and bite me? You know, am I going to get in trouble? Of course there's liability, but I can tell you that, you know, we've sold over 3,000 houses that we fixed. We've had some, you know, complaints, don't get me wrong, but we've never been sued and lost a lawsuit. So it's a very minute chance of something happening. If you do things right and you're fair with people, you really probably won't have problems with that. So I think sometimes realtors put too much emphasis on liability. You know, that's some brokers. I don't know how Gabe is, if he's scaring his agents or not.
Not me.
But
Anna over there. She scares everybody.
I scare him enough.
So I don't worry too much about that. I mean, if you just conduct business properly and are fair and you know, take care of things if they're wrong. I mean, if people move into a house and they say they had a problem, you know, we go take care of it if it's something that should have been taken care of.
Yeah.
If we have an unreasonable request, they're saying, hey, you know, I want this, this, and that. If it's not reasonable, you know, we'll tell them no. I mean, that wasn't part of what you were buying from us, or
Yeah.
you know. But we're just fair with people, and I don't think you have to worry about that. For me, that's never been a deterrent. I've seen people turn down deals because, you know, they're kind of afraid of the liability or not want to own rental properties because of the liability. I mean, you know, we have hundreds of tenants, and the same thing. I mean, we've never been sued for something or lost a lawsuit, but, you know, because we were negligent. So just take care of things and be fair, and you should be okay.
Yeah, don't let it fear you. I will say
Yeah.
this. I mean, so on the agent's perspective, you know, I know you're an agent, but disclosure is really the biggest things that will get you guys in trouble. Just be honest. Like, if something was unpermitted, just say it was unpermitted, right? It's the moment where you try to lie about it and then they go back and they just say, you weren't truthful. What else is wrong? Once they think one thing's wrong, they think everything's wrong. So just be honest. I just say disclose, disclose, disclose. The more you say And the more that you told them beforehand will keep your hands clean. You know what I mean? That's for me. That's not right. You're not even on the site, so you don't have to even say anything. So no, okay. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here. I just got 2 more questions for you. You know, one question I did have is, who is your hero? Who do you look up to?
I'd say my dad.
Yeah.
My dad really, like, I went to college and got a college degree, but after college, I went to work for my dad, you know, in a small company. I went to California and worked for him. This was like pre-internet, pre-text, pre-everything.
Right.
And he was in Tucson, I'm in California, and we would talk like on the phone every day. That's how he would help me train. And that's really like, that put me on a path. It was my dad that kind of put me on a path in business and in life that had the most influence on me. I feel like he's, you know, the most you know, responsible for where I ended up in life was him. So I'd say my dad's my hero. Yeah.
What was it that you were working on? What was he doing?
He had an importing company. He was importing audio and video cassette products. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
From China. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, my dad got me into real estate, and that's how I started falling into that trap.
Oh, I didn't know you got you into real estate.
Yeah, well, he did real estate, and I remember going and they were punching in the old school, you know, ones, the little lock boxes. But yeah, I think that's what kind of sparked the interest. Okay, so the last thing is, you know, for everybody here, what's a nugget? What was something that you would say, a valuable tip, or just any advice that you would give somebody? What's your one nugget that you'd give to these guys?
I'd say just invest in yourself. I mean, you have a lot of knowledge being in the business that you're in. I mean, you're with a good brokerage. You know, you're in a good city that has a lot of opportunities. I mean, there's a lot of knocks on Tucson, but there's a lot of pros in Tucson, especially if you're in the real estate business. So I would just say have an open mind, keep your eyes open. I mean, maybe you don't want to go into investing like as a full-time profession, but you know, take the time, because like I said before, you're really very close. You may not know it or not. Even if you haven't done a flip before, you're not that far off from being able to do it. It doesn't take anything, you know, super special, and just put yourself in a position so that when these opportunities present themselves, you can capitalize on it, recognize it, and, you know, add that to your repertoire. So that'd be my advice for today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you guys for being here. Obviously, collaboration is everything. So thank you. Let's give it up for Kyle. And stick around. We got some food. Please collaborate, mingle, network. This is a time when you guys can invest in yourself. Just even having one conversation can change your life. So thank you, Kyle, for being here, man. I appreciate it, brother. I appreciate it.